Hey folks, today I'm sharing my recipe and method for making homemade noodles. I really love to eat noodles like noodle soup or stir fries, all sorts of Asian dishes, and it's really fantastic to be able to have your own fresh homemade noodles. I'm going to show you how I store them as well so that you can make a big batch and then store them in the freezer and they're ready to go whenever you want them. In this recipe, I'm using buckwheat. You don't have to use buckwheat, but I'll explain how the recipe goes. So I'll just start off with 150 grams of buckwheat. That's the whole grain. I'll be milling this with my wheat in my mock mill. I also have 200 grams of whole wheat flour, which that's the whole wheat grain that'll be milled into flour. And then to those two, I add 150 grams of all-purpose or plain flour. So you just really, you can use any combination of flours that you like, but make sure that it's mostly wheat. And then you can add other things in if you want, in place of the buckwheat. So yeah, 500 grams of total flour, mostly wheat. Combine that with 250 grams of water, and that's half the water amount of the total flour amount. That's the basic formula. If you can remember that, then you can't really go wrong. I also don't add any salt to this dough. It's a really simple, straight dough. There's no eggs, there's no milk, there's no oil, there's nothing. It's just flour and water, but it makes really awesome noodles and pasta, so I really like it. So basically just mix the flour and water together. It is going to be a very firm dough, so you have to do a little bit of hand mixing to bring it together, but it doesn't take too long. I just kind of mix it in the bowl until I've got a rough kind of lump, and then tip everything out on the bench as I'm showing here, and just give it a really good knead. Now it doesn't take too long at all. You will see that I'm kind of pushing the lump of dough onto the flour, the loose flour on the bench, and it just picks it up. So you just keep pushing, wipe the bench with the dough, kind of pick up all those little bits of flour, and before you know it, you'll have your dough done without any mess, really. I like the fact that this doesn't use eggs or anything. It's so simple, it's easy to clean up. It's very affordable too. It's very basic. You could just make this dough with all-purpose flour if you wanted to. So there you go, got a nice little clean dough lump. You can wipe the bench with it if you want to really get any little last bits of flour. Once you've got your basic dough together, I just rest that then for 30 minutes. Just put it in a bowl, put a cover on it so that it doesn't dry out, and just give it a little bit of time to sit. And what that does, it just kind of relaxes the dough a little bit, makes it easier to knead, and then you just give it a final kneading just to make it a bit smoother, give it a slightly better consistency. And the final kneading kind of gives it a little bit more strength too. So you're just strengthening the gluten in the flour a little bit more so you get a more firm, good textured pasta or noodle. So yeah, this is the final kneading. I don't do it for too long at all, just a brief little kneading just to pull it together. I'm just showing you there, squeezing it, showing you how firm it is. When you first mix this dough, it seems really dry, but don't be tempted to add any more water. You really want it nice and firm like this. Otherwise your noodles will be too kind of soggy and they'll fall apart. That needs to be a really firm dough. So I just give it a final kneading just to make it nice and smooth, and then it's ready for the next step. You could roll this out straight away, but I find the texture is a lot better if I cover it and put it into the fridge for a few hours. You can leave it in the fridge for a few days if you really want to, but I tend to just mix my dough in the morning, and then later on in the afternoon I roll out my noodles and cut them, and then I'm done. There's the dough. It's really cold, obviously, and quite firm from being in the fridge. So I just roll that into a big sort of sausage shape, and that just makes it easier to cut the dough into smaller portions for the rolling. I just use my plastic plaster knife that I got from the hardware shop. Nothing fancy, just cut it up into smaller pieces, just maybe 6 pieces. And then with each piece, you want to roll it out and cut your noodles. I've got this KitchenAid stand mixer with a pasta attachment, so I'm using that. But you don't need fancy equipment. You just roll out each piece as thin as you can, dust them with some rice flour like I'm doing there, and then you could just fold them up and cut them with a knife. But I've got this pasta attachment, and because I like to make noodles fairly regularly, it has been a good investment for me. But yeah, it's not going to be possible for everybody. So just do it in whatever way that you can. I've seen some beautiful hand cut noodles where people just roll them out really thinly, and then yeah, lots of rice flour to dust them, or even cornstarch is good, but the dusting is really important, otherwise they stick together. So give them a good dusting. I cut them into lengths too before I cut them, just because it makes them a bit easier to handle. So if you were doing this by hand at this point, you could just roll up those pieces of dough and cut them into strips, and then kind of gently pull them apart, and you'll have your noodles. So here we go for another one. With my KitchenAid attachment, I start on 1, which is the widest gap, and then I slowly bring it down to 2, and then I bring it down to 3. So these are quite thin noodles, because I like my noodles quite thin. Oh, that was quite a long one. So I cut that one into thirds to make smaller strips, and then bring it down to the thinnest, or to the number 3 setting. This machine does go thinner than the third setting, but that's thin enough for me. There we go, and just dusting each one. It's really important to do the dusting. They will stick together if you don't dust them well enough. And the extra flour that you dust them with, it just comes off when you cook them. So it's no problem at all if they're a little bit floury, because you just drain it out of the water. Now I've just, I'm going to cut these just to show you how, rather than go through all of them first. Normally I would roll them all first and then cut them all together. And there they are. This is the spaghetti cutter attachment I've got on there now. I'll just cut them all into their fine noodle spaghetti kind of shapes, and then roll them up into little nests. This is the really fun part. If you've got a pasta maker, whether it's a benchtop one or a KitchenAid kind of one like this, it is really fun to see the noodles coming out. Very satisfying indeed. Here's some more. So I kind of do 2 little strips per portion. You can kind of work out, visualize how much noodles you would eat in a sitting, and make your noodle nests the right size according to what you think you would like. They do expand a little bit when you cook them. But yeah, just make little nests and put them on a tray, and I'll show you what we do with them once they're all done. There we go. A few little nests there. And here are all the noodle nests complete. They're a bit messy, but I don't care too much about that because I'm just going to eat them. I thought I'd show you this little trick too of how I clean my bench. If you've got a bench scraper like this, it is so easy to clean up. A little wave there. And there are your noodles. So once they're all done and they're on a tray, put them into your freezer for a couple of hours, and this just firms them up, freezes them, so that they're a bit easier to pack up then. Once they're frozen, I just put them into a Ziploc bag, and then I put them in my freezer. And when you want to make your noodles, you just go and grab out a portion or 2 or however much you want, and pop them in some boiling water, and you've got fresh, beautiful fresh noodles. I find this the easiest way. You can dry your noodles as well, but it's a bit more complicated and takes a bit more work. This is the easiest way to do it if you're going to do it on a regular basis. They do keep for a few months in the freezer, or even up to a week in the fridge is good too. And you just cook them straight from frozen. This is an old batch, an old photo that I found. Yeah, you just pop them in boiling water and they come apart and cook beautifully. They only take a couple of minutes to cook. Yum, there they are. All the links and the recipe and everything you need to know is in the description box. And that's it. Thanks for watching, everybody. Please subscribe to the channel if you'd like to support what I'm doing here, and liking and sharing my videos with others is a really big help. I thank you for your support, and I'll see you in the next video. Thank you.